Okay, hello everyone. So today we're going to look at this question, which is evaluate the extent to which the urban environment creates challenges for a UK city you have studied. So obviously for you guys, it's going to be Nottingham. Now, first things first, let's just have a quick bug of the question. I'll do this in a slightly different colour today. So when we bug the question, it's just make sure that we underline what this command word is telling us to do. So evaluate, in fact, we need to evaluate the extent to which the urban environment, so we need to make sure we're concentrating fully on our urban environment, our cities, creates challenges. So we're not going to be talking about opportunities for a UK city you have studied. So we need to be thinking UK city. And of course, our UK city is Nottingham. And when you're going through your answer, always make sure you're going back, looking at the question and making sure you're answering it. Okay, so if we just have a think of some of the challenges that we have in Nottingham, first of all, a key one that I always kind of come back to is health. Remember, we have some really big discrepancies or variations in health in Nottingham. The next one that I always think is really good to use is employment. Another one that you might want to discuss is the environment. Crime, I'm sure you're aware, crime is a really interesting topic in Nottingham. And then finally, housing. So in your exam, I guess some of you might be thinking, what should I do? Do I need to remember all of these? Well, I would say going into your exam, it's really useful if you can remember all of them. However, in an exam question, remember your time limited, okay? And we need to be thinking, which ones do I want to be able to talk about more in depth, okay? That's the most important thing. I would suggest here, the best thing would be to pick 2 or maybe 3 at most and really delve into them a bit more deeply. But let's just have a quick look at each of these in turn. So first of all, in health, we have extreme variation in health, okay? And I always refer back to one really interesting comparison, and that is between Woollerton, which is our rich area, or our more affluent area of Nottingham, and St Anne's. So Woollerton, life expectancy is 10 years is more than 10 years, so we'll put 10 years plus longer than St Anne's, okay, which is our poorer area of Nottingham, our more deprived area, some would say as well. Okay, a lot of that, in fact, half of that, 50% of those 10 years is simply due to smoking, okay? And it's a reflection in the education, really, of the people living within the 2 different areas. Woollerton, more healthier than St Anne's, okay? So we have that extreme health variation. Employment's another really, really interesting one in Nottingham. So Nottingham has 2 times the national average of unemployment. So the national average is 4%, is 2%. So I'm just going to put 2% NA, national average, whereas Nottingham, I'll just put knots here, is equal to 4%. In fact, it's actually 4.1%, it's slightly higher. Okay, one other thing that you might want to think about there is we have this 2 times amount of employment. We also see a lot of gig economy work in Nottingham as well. Okay, and I put gig economy. And those people often have very limited rights in their types of employment. Okay. The next thing I'd like us to go on to is looking at housing. And again, in housing, we see very extreme variation. And a good example of that looks at the north-south divide that really exists for large parts of Nottingham, with the south areas like Rushcliffe, with very high average house prices. It's not uncommon for houses within the Rushcliffe borough to go anywhere from £300,000 to £400,000. So if we put as a rough estimate, about £300,000 per house. When we look in somewhere like St Anne's, prices are anywhere from £80,000 to about £115,000. Now, some of these houses in St Anne's as well still suffer from some of the classic things that we saw in 1950s or 1960s Nottingham, with these problems with damp and asbestos, which is another problem in some in many of Nottingham houses, lead to health issues. And damp is generally associated with coughing or with asthma. Okay. Okay, let's have a look at crime quickly. So crime's an interesting one in Nottingham because it obviously has some knife crime. Okay, it's well publicised in the press. Throughout the noughties, so from 2000 to about 2010, crime, and especially gun crime, was particularly well publicised and high in Nottingham. And this led to the name Shottingham. Finally, and I think this is really important to note, nationally, crime is not that high. i.e., it doesn't sit that unusually with other cities of the same size. It's not like an area such as London where it has large problems. In a similar vein, in the environment, Nottingham does a very good job at building on brownfield sites. Okay, areas like the Boots HQ were built upon brownfield sites. And this leads me to conclude that ultimately the environment in Nottingham is actually quite well managed compared to many other UK cities. Okay, so what would I do from there? So this is good for revision, but there's too much there to be able to write a 9 marker in, say, 12 minutes or even less than 12 minutes. I normally say a mark a minute in your exam. So what I would focus on if I was going into this is I'd discuss employment, definitely. I think there's a really interesting challenge in employment. I would look at health and the health issues that are existing in Nottingham as well. And then I'd leave it up to you. But I think housing's very interesting, or crime. But maybe I'd look at housing because I know slightly more about that kind of information. So we need to evaluate the extent. So I would say, looking at that and being evaluative, overall, there are quite high issues and challenges that exist in Nottingham within its urban environment, okay? And those typically reside in health, employment, and housing. However, when we look at different indicators like crime or the environment, they're not such high challenges. They're by no means opportunities. However, they are lower down on our list, okay? And that's something that you can bring into your answer. Okay, I hope this has been useful for your revision, and thank you very much and have a lovely evening.